6 o'clock, so we'll start the meeting. Thank you. Right, welcome everybody. So straight to the agenda. Apologies, please, Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sue Ball, Councillor Dermot Murphy and Councillor Alistair Sutton.
Thank you. Public participation. We have a couple of written questions with the answers, if you'd like 5 minutes to read them. And then we'll go into the speakers. Everybody had long enough? Okay, we'll move on to the speakers. First speaker tonight is Mr. Peter Dobbs, local resident. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, and there's the problem that we're trying to encapsulate and solve. I find it extraordinary that you're being asked to agree to send this deeply flawed draft report to public consultation. If you do agree, then it will be a clear example of box ticking. A revised action plan is urgently required that addresses the central issue of HGV traffic and meets the DEFRA standard. From the perspective of Ashbourne residents, it's particularly frustrating that concerns about rate of progress and effectiveness of most of the actions in the plan have been repeatedly batted away as if our opinions were of little value. In June, you were asked which of the 11 actions would have a significant impact in the next 4 years, and the evidence for that. 2 months ago, a figure of 20% for the reduction in NOx levels was questioned, as was the apparent omission of a new hotspot at the top of Buxton Hill. On the 9th of September, you were sent a detailed commentary of the 11 actions in the draft plan. These criticisms have now been endorsed by Ashbourne Town Council, but no response has been given to this by county or district. Weeks later, we find DEFRA repeating many of these concerns in their emphatic rejection of the draft plan. The 2021 Environment Act requires that responsibility for solutions to poor air quality is shared across local government structures and with relevant public bodies. I therefore urge councillors to stop allowing a few individuals at County Hall to dictate the content of this plan. It seems that the sum total of that team's response to the considerable criticism of their original report is to commission consultants to do some of the work that should have been in place before they ever put forward a plan. And it appears that even this work will only provide partial responses to a small minority of the DEFRA criticisms. And so my questions are these. As DEFRA has highlighted, many fields in the rejected plan are incorrectly or inadequately completed or just blank. Who is taking responsibility for ensuring these and other requirements by DEFRA are fully satisfied before a revised action plan is submitted, and when will this be completed? And 2, if, as seems very likely, the reduction in NOx from the currently listed actions fails to predict that the air quality objective will be achieved within the medium term, what will you add to your action plan so that the health of Ashbourne residents can be safeguarded? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbs. The next speaker is Mr. Robin Curry, local resident. Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. On the 2nd of October, I wrote an email to all members of Derbyshire Dales District Council, bringing to attention my extreme concerns as a newcomer to the district in respect of the failure to deal with the important life-affecting issue of delivery of a meaningful air quality management plan for the designated area in Ashbourne. I explained my concerns and discussed the shortcomings with what was then proposed as a plan. I was greatly reassured by the number of replies that I received from members of this council, assuring me of their support and their determination to resolve this in a meaningful manner. Since then, I've now received copies of the so-called revised plan, which is to be put before this committee tonight. It seeks member approval for the document to form the basis of public consultation. I can only say how very disappointing I find the report before you, which is little more than a rehash of the former document. It does nothing to explain or quantify how the necessary reductions will be achieved, merely proposing a number of possible initiatives of a minor nature, none of which are targeted at the largest contributor to the pollution problem, that is that of heavy commercial traffic. I've also studied the appraisal of DEFRA in respect to the initial draft plan, the content of which is even more concerning given the many fundamental aspects that have been left unanswered or unresolved by the Council. The current draft does little to address the most serious points, and it is difficult to see how the Council could legally consult on a plan which is inaccurate, does not respond to the appraisal of DEFRA, and so will not enable it to meet its obligations. It is, of course, right and proper that the County Council be consulted and engaged in view of its role in helping to deliver the eventual plan. But it is this Council that has responsibility for discharging the air quality management plan, and its contribution at this point must be to press for actions that will definitely resolve the problem, furthering the interests of the residents of Ashbourne rather than enabling the avoidance of this by others. So my question is, will this Council now resolve to direct its responsible officers to produce a plan which those officers can professionally certify as being deliverable and capable of meeting
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Curry.
all the requirements of the AQMA, fully in accordance with the direction given by DEFRA? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, moving on. Approval of minutes of previous meeting. Councillor Hobson proposed. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Finesse, thank you. Item 4, interests. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest they may have in subsequent agenda items in accordance with the District Council's Code of Conduct. Oh, sorry, yes. All those in favour of the minutes? That's unanimous, thank you. Sorry about that. Again, interests. I'll start again. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest they may have in subsequent agenda items in accordance with the District Council's Code of Conduct. Those interests are matters that relate to money or that which can be valued in money affecting the member, his, her partner, extended family and close friends. Interests that become apparent at a later stage in the proceedings may be declared at that time. Okay, no interest, thank you. Item 5, Ashbourne Air Quality Management Area Action Plan. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the report. I've also got Amanda Goodwill, who's our Environmental Health Manager, and Karen Carpenter, who's our Environmental Health Officer, who deals with pollution control matters, here to talk to the report and to answer any questions as well. This report presents a current draft of the Air Quality Action Plan to committee, as has previously been requested by members. Officers have been very well aware of the urgency of this matter, as has previously been expressed in this room, and have been keen to bring the report before members as soon as possible. Initially, the draft action plan proposed a list of 11 measures which were aimed at reducing air pollution through a variety of means. However, following publication of the agenda for this meeting, a revised series of measures, plus updates to the associated text, was received from Derbyshire County Council in response to the comments that had previously been received from stakeholders. Officers were of the view that this most recent update to the proposed action plan should be shared with members as soon as possible, and consequently a revised action plan document was circulated to members on Friday last week. Whilst we apologise for this late amendment, officers believe that it was important for members to be provided with the most recent iteration of the action plan as soon as possible. We recognise this has caused some concern amongst members, but believe it's important to be as transparent on the matter as possible. Officers are aware that some of those who've already commented on the draft action plan believe it does not contain enough in the way of direct action, as has been expressed by the two speakers this evening. Specifically, that it should include measures that directly limit or prohibit the use of Buxton Road by HGVs. However, it's the belief of our colleagues at Derbyshire County Council Transport Strategy Team that it is entirely possible to reduce pollution levels to comply with the air quality objective by the means outlined in the draft plan. The graph on page 12 presents that in a visual manner and suggests that air quality objectives should be met by 2025. We recognise that metrics are needed to support the assertions in the action plan, and you'll note at paragraph 2.8 of the report that further work has been commissioned to address that matter. It's worth saying that whilst it's the responsibility of the District Council, us, to produce the action plan, as previously explained, responsibility for the majority of actions to reduce pollution actually falls to Derbyshire County Council. And as Mr Dobbs has expressed, both authorities have a legal duty, to work together to produce an action plan that is both agreed and works. If members do approve the officer recommendation this evening, the measures within the draft action plan will be subject to a wide-ranging public consultation. The results of that consultation would be brought back before a future meeting of this committee before the final action plan could be agreed and submitted to DEFRA. I'm going to hand over to Karen now to just speak briefly to the amendments to the action plan so that you can fully understand those.
The Derbyshire County Council recently updated the information, and this really is to provide a more up-to-date picture of what the current situation is. Obviously, it's an ever-changing situation with the work they're doing behind the scenes to promote the work, and so we are constantly looking to update that information. There has been a commissioned report to fulfil those requirements of DEFRA for the cost of the works and the cost-benefit analysis, and also the mitigation measures and how effective they're likely to be. That's with a transport and air quality consultant at the moment, and we're expecting those results in perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. I can't give a definite date. Further report on the first phase of action, the new Action 1, is also due around the same time. So we'll have further information then with which to update the air quality action plan. And that's really what I have to say.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, so we'll take those now.
Any questions? Councillor Ratcliffe.
If I may just start off the debate, if that's what we're going to pursue with a couple of very straightforward questions. But I would just want to preempt that with just a comment, if you'll allow me, Chair, to make it. I fully accept where the officers are coming from, and it's probably no fault of theirs that the amended report did come out late. I think the anxiety, if you like, probably from this side of the room, is that whilst it's all well and good to say, yeah, there's an urgency about this, we are in fact allowing we're doing something that is, in strict terms, not in accordance with the best procedures of committee hearings, reports and agendas, which has always, to the best of my knowledge, dictated that we receive them and they are made available, most importantly, for the general public and other interested parties at least 5 days before the hearing begins and the questions and debate begins. So I think there's still some uneasiness, if I'm not really, making a personal point here. I think we would agree, my colleagues down this side, that we are doing something that really, to some degree, might be used in the future disadvantageously to say, look, we've got a precedent here. We did it for this air quality report and allowed it to go ahead. So I'm a little uneasy, but I'll make my 2 questions, Chair, and then you can come back on, Chair, whether you're going to allow this to go forward this evening or whether or not, in fact, we are going to defer it. My questions are, when will we see some priorities given to the actions, coupled, of course, with the metrics that are required to ascertain what each individual action of those 11 is going to produce? And then secondly, this is a very direct question. You heard the comments of the 2 Ashbourne representatives. Do you feel that we have adequately addressed DEFRA's concerns?
I'll kick off with, to start the answers. Karen and Amanda will probably come in afterwards. As Karen said earlier, we're expecting a report from the County Council in terms of the metrics and priorities within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's right, isn't it, Karen?
I think in terms of DEFRA's concerns, there's probably a little bit of misinterpretation in terms of the first submission that was made to them. There is a template document that all local authorities have to follow in terms of the air quality action plan format, and that's what we've utilised, and hence some areas weren't able to populate at the time, and we were just asking for feedback on certain elements, and that's perhaps where there's been some misconception. So we were asking for comments. It wasn't a formal submission or otherwise. It was commentary on some of the things. But in terms of DEFRA, how they respond, as probably all government departments do, they have a certain approach, and it is a very formal approach. But
if you'll allow me, I'm sorry,
sorry.
interjecting.
No.
So are you saying that there will be a final submission back to DEFRA for it to be signed off? Yeah, you want just to clear that point?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, definitely.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. First one is, given that the revised action plan was circulated on Friday, are you certain that the council is meeting its statutory obligations in terms of availability of committee and council reports to the public? And my second question is, given that if the report is approved for consultation this evening, the likelihood is that the first question that we as members will be asked by residents of Ashbourne is, will the 11 measures have the desired effect of reducing NO2 levels below the danger limit? Will they result in a reduction of 22%? Are you able, as authors of the report, and given the report will go out
as a district council publication, are you able to give us an answer to that question? Will the 11 measures result in the required reduction in NO2 levels?
I think in relation to the first question, all three of us will probably have to bow to the expertise of those who administer committees. I don't know the answer to that, and I can't give you an answer. In relation to the second question, County Council colleagues are very confident about it. DEFRA are optimistic about the measures, and officers are the same. We will be very interested in seeing the metrics that are proposed to be, that are due to be produced by their consultants. That will obviously provide some objective means of judging the effectiveness of each of the individual measures. Anything to add?
Can I just come back on that? I was optimistic that Ireland would win the Cricket World Cup, but my optimism proved ill-founded. Could you say whether, in your opinion, the measures will achieve the required reduction?
I think officers are confident that they will, on the information available to us at the moment. Obviously, the proof of the pudding's in the eating, and there will be a series, as members heard at the briefing session, there will be a series of annual reviews of the action plan, and its success or otherwise will be measured against what we're finding on site. If it doesn't produce an improvement, then something more will have to be done.
Just to follow up on that, to make members aware, we were party to those discussions with the consultants in terms of what we needed out of that work. So I think we've covered all those bases in terms of those elements that we need to knit into the report.
I would appreciate an answer to the first question, Chair, from whoever.
I'm deeply concerned that on Friday an updated action plan was sent to district council members of this committee. And it wasn't just one or two amendments, it was a significant rewrite of pretty well the whole thing. The whole action plan has changed. That concerned me over the weekend and spoilt my trip to York, if I'm blatantly honest. So much so that I did speak to Mr. Braun on another matter on Saturday, but it festered a little bit more, and I sent, because Mr. McLaughlin is away, I sent Mr. Jason Spencer an email this morning, and I carbon copied yourself, Chair, and the leader and other people into that. And I asked about whether we were breaching our own regulations in relation to it being a democratic process, because you've got a significant number of people here that are involved, and a town that wants to be put their case forward. I want to know, I've not received a reply from Democratic Services to say whether or not it breaches. Councillor O'Brien hasn't received a reply. Are we legitimate in this being pursued? And I do have other questions to ask, but that's the first one, and I find it very upsetting that I've not received a reply to my inquiry. Thank you.
We'll just carry on with questions, Councillor Wayne, and Kerry will get you an answer to that one. Okay. Yeah, just hang on, Councillor Hughes. Yeah, you're next.
I'm just a little bit annoyed, but never mind. Right, the first question is, I would have, just an observation, I would have much preferred to see, instead of investigating a fancy piece of technology, we were investigating the potential for weight limits and speed reductions. But one of the questions I've got is the calculations on page 12 or page 20, whichever one you look at the amended, are your calculations on the graph on page 12 for the projected annual average of NOx concentrations of the report taken from the tube that initially was actually flagged up the management area? Or is it somewhere else? Where is the tube that you, that's the first question, where is the tube on Buxton Hill? And are there any other tubes on Buxton Hill that are showing significantly more than that? That's the first question. The second question is, basically, Action 3 states that, how can, I'm asking a question, but I'm telling you something. I'm asking, how can this be a valid action if Derbyshire County Council are now dismissing the possibility of viable alternative routes to reflect the HGV ban? And what is the point in advising drivers to take another route if they're saying there aren't any other routes? It's like, totally contradictory what they're saying. That's the second question. Sorry, I'm just going through them because I've printed off the wrong document. And there's no data is quoted, no data on how much difference the pedestrian smooth driving. What effect will the many pedestrians in Matlock have to this smooth driving claim that they're going to say because they can moderate traffic, it's going to be smooth driving? Sure, the pedestrians are going to have an effect on that. I think those are the three that I can remember. Thank you.
I'll answer certainly the first question. The calculation was done by Derbyshire County Council using the data from our annual status report submitted in 2020, because at the moment we're using 2019 data because the traffic levels in 2019 so far are the highest levels since the pandemic. So all the data for 21 and up to this point in time in 2022 and 2020 are lower levels of traffic as we speak. So the highest level and the worst case scenario is 2019. So it's based on that tube in 2019, which was its highest level it achieved, as it's been under the air quality objective for 2 years in 2020 and 2021. This year I can't comment as yet because we haven't received the bias adjustment factor from DEFRA, and the annual average needs to be times by the bias adjustment, which is a sort of calibration type thing that happens with NOx tubes. So I'm not in a position yet. That's only at the end of March will I be in a position to discuss with you figures for 2022. So that's why that year was chosen, and that was a DEFRA calculation process, and that was undertaken by Derbyshire County Council.
So just quickly, Chair, I understand what the bias is, but from the raw figures, the raw data, is that higher or lower than the 2019 figures, with, not taking account of the bias? Thank you.
I can't tell you exactly, but it's looking very similar. It's not, I don't think it'll be higher, but I can't say because I can't say what the bias will be this year. It depends whether that's higher or lower.
And do you have an answer to the other two questions, please?
This is a system that Derbyshire County Council are putting into place so that if they've also put a bid into DEFRA as part of Action 3. So we're not in a position yet to know if that bid has been successful, but that is that is looking to develop their information system so that if there's perhaps air quality issues in Ashbourne at the time, then they can send information to through their guidance to try to get people to alter their route prior to going through Ashbourne. They can also look at whether there's congestion and try to get people to change their route based on congestion. And I think they hope that because people will be far enough away receiving this information, they'll make a decision prior to their journeys. But I couldn't give you any more information regarding the absolute detail of that methodology, except it's like the boards that there'll be in-car information and there'll be roadside information provided.
So just in a nutshell, Derbyshire County Council haven't got the technology yet, so it's going to be difficult to assess currently, and we don't know, we're going to be reliant on people complying. There's a lot of very imponderables, aren't there, with this?
This is something that's, again, something for the future that is being brought in response to this plan. And again, this will be assessed based on the report that will come in 2 to 3 weeks.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with some of my colleagues about the timeliness of this report. But taking a more positive view, I welcome the changes in the list of actions, particularly the removal of the prospective bypass to the long grass, as it were, and the promotion of traffic management, which seems to be something that may have some effect in a relatively short period of time. I've got 1 or 2 questions on the revised report. I did have questions on the old report, but I've had to abandon those. First of all, on page 12, the graph. Are these there's a natural there's a reduction in NO2 levels through time shown in that graph. I assume that's nothing to do with the measures that are being put in place. Is that correct? Is this natural reduction because cars and trucks are becoming cleaner and there are more electric vehicles, or is this to do with the measures that are put in place? If it is to do with the measures put in place, how was it produced if we haven't finished modelling the impact of those measures yet?
This is a DEFRA method of projecting annual average NO2 concentrations on any road. It won't be specific to these actions because it is a nationwide calculation tool. So it's not linked to the actions that we are proposing. It's linked to the projections over time of how NO2 will be reduced with changes in technology in cars, etc.
So improve cleaner cars and cleaner trucks. So by 2025, we expect the air quality levels in Ashbourne are not going to break the regulations. Is that correct?
That is a projected assumption, yes.
Right. So we need to be looking at measures that predate 2025. I mean, we want to reduce levels anyway below those because all pollution is harmful. But to meet our legal responsibilities, or county council, I'm not sure whose it is, legal responsibilities, we need something that's going to take place between now and 2025, and therefore anything after 2025 we can forget. So the next question then is, which of these measures will achieve any reasonable result between now and 2025?
Yeah, but it goes back to the original comment in terms of the metrics and the proportionment work that's being done at the moment. So we'll know about those in a few weeks' time.
And in terms of those measures, which of those measures will be modelled over the next few weeks?
The urban traffic management system is now in place at Derbyshire County Council, and they have commissioned their phase 1 piece of work, which is to look at the junctions and any changes to priorities and the junctions going southbound. So that information is also expected back alongside the metrics to look at what the potential reductions are, and that is the first phase. Then once they've got that result in, they will ask the consultancy to further model further improvements if it comes back that they're required.
All right, so that would mean that they're modelling possibly the consequences of action 1, or they're determining what action 1, action 2, and action 3 should be through that modelling work. Okay, so that sounds quite a positive piece of work.
They have said that should the information come back on the phase 1, that works would start immediately to look at making those priority changes.
So that could be done into 2023, 24, that sort of timescale?
I think so.
Well, that sounds good. Okay, so in that case, and how long are we waiting for that information?
It's approximately 3 weeks.
Couldn't we defer this report for 3 weeks and come back again to put it to another council meeting and then we'll have numbers that we can put out in our consultation, and we won't lose any time. And it'd be more effective consultation as well. I move that we defer this until we have the results from the consultation, from the modelling work that is being done by Derbyshire County Council.
Councillor Purdy.
Chair, I've expressed in emails to Councillor O'Brien and Wayne my concern that we've been critical as a committee of the delays, and I think we're on moral ground here. I think if we go for deferment, we are guilty then of delays. I would like to see this moved and get the actions moving as quickly as possible, and then we will come back in December with all the evidence. I see no point, quite frankly, in deferring it. What we're going to do, we need to let these officers get on with this modelling. If there's no question seemingly coming from this side, forgive us, because I've done a lot of pre-briefing with the officers, so done a lot of those questions you've asked. I'm also able to tell you that a couple of weeks ago I attended a meeting where the former Chief Exec of Longcliffe Quarry was in attendance, and where I've badgered Councillor Spencer before now and Councillor Lewis about the wanting to put a HGV ban on, which has been our label, our mantra. Even Mr. Russell said it's really practically impossible to do. It would have such a knock-on ripple effect that it's not really the answer. So we appreciate that. We're waiting in the long grass, as you quite rightly put, for the bypass. So I think that amelioration measures are the way forward. And this new modelling that's just been landed on the desk at County Council, I think is the way forward. So I personally couldn't agree with a deferral.
Could I support Councillor Hughes' proposal, Chair, please? I think a decision to consult on something with real evidence rather than something which based on optimism would be respected by the residents of Ashbourne. So I'm happy to second Councillor Hughes' proposal to defer to the next meeting.
Chair, can I just say it also gets over the problem that whether this is constitutional or not.
Can I just give you an update of what I've looked at the Constitution in accordance with the? Let me just tell you which part it is here. It's Part 4, the Rules of Procedure. What I've located it on Section 6 on page 20, Part 4, page 27. It talks about access to the agenda and reports before the meeting. It's not a very long paragraph, so I'll just read it for everyone's benefit. And it just says that the Council will make copies of the agenda and reports open to the public and made available for inspection at the Town Hall at least 5 clear days before the meeting. If an item is added to the agenda later, the revised agenda and where reports are prepared after the summons has been sent out, the designated officer shall make each such report available to the public as soon as the report is completed and sent to councillors, and it will be open to inspection from that time as the item is added to the agenda. So taking that into account, it does allow for late reports, and that isn't what's happened here. This isn't a late report. It's just simply an amendment to a report because we received information after the date in which the agenda was published. So I hope that answers the question in regards to late reports.
Not completely. It depends on the definition of amendments. I mean, this is a complete rewrite.
Well, what it's saying here is completely new reports can be added to the agenda less than 5 days. So I'm just taking it a more, sort of step back approach and saying that you could have something that wasn't even on the agenda at all brought to you less than, with less than 5 days to go.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening very carefully to colleagues' considered comments and the concerns of the public. Deferment always worries me. I'm feeling this is step one, and I think it's a step that we probably need to take rather than just push it forward even a few weeks. So I'll reserve judgment yet, but deferment doesn't feel right. I'd rather get on with it, and then it comes back to council for more actions. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I've got one more speaker, and then we'll go to vote on the deferment. Councillor Buttle.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I had two questions. The first question was, did Derbyshire County Council have a particular reason that they were not going to look at weight limits for central Ashbourne or timed weight limits? Was there something that actually made that impossible? And as most of these, second question, as most of these priority actions that we're coming up with seem to be desktop exercises, are there any of these that have been done already? And if not, why not? You know, like we've got a big pile of things here where someone sits at a desk and ticks some boxes and works their way through things. Are there any of these things that could have been done already? And if they haven't been done, why haven't they been done? Those were my two questions. My third point, which is actually speaking to Peter and Steve's point, we are waiting to find out what confidence we can apply to this air quality action plan with consultants who will be back with us in 3 weeks' time. Well, wouldn't it make sense to actually know if we actually are consulting on something that's going to work? If we are going to consult on something that's going to work, then fantastic. I am quite encouraged by Mr. Braun's pointing out that he actually has some confidence in this. That's the first positive thing I've heard about this so far, so that's great news. But I think I'm quite okay with just letting this stand to one side just for a month while we find out with what we're doing is professionally judged to be a competent choice. And so there's two questions and a comment.
Okay, for the first one regarding the weight limits, the A515 is the arterial route through Ashbourne. It's an A road and therefore it's classified as the right route for vehicles of a heavy goods vehicle nature to pass through. When we were in the meeting with the air quality consultants, they approved of that as well. So they said that they were actually using the right road rather than sending them on the B roads, etc. So the road is the road they ought to be using. So that's why they're not looking at weight limits on the A road, but what they have agreed to do is part of their modelling is look at whether there are any weight limits that can go on other roads around Ashbourne that may inhibit the amount of HGVs that choose to travel through Ashbourne, but they will not do it on the main A route. All actions that are in the list are being progressed as we speak. The county are not putting a stop to any of the actions, whether we accept this list or not. We are required to produce an action plan. It's not a one-off action plan. We can add to it, which is why we need to continue with the process in order to move to having an action plan in place. It has to come back to this committee. We've got to go through a consultation. That consultation may bring about extra actions also as a result of what information comes back through that consultation. So this is a plan that is not a stay the same document. It is a document that has to change as information changes. And for the...
You've dealt with both questions.
Have I? Yeah. Okay. I was trying to think what was the last one.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just going to bring Councillor Hobson in because she was actually down for a question before Councillor Wayne. So, Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to gentlemen who've come to speak. I know we've seen Mr Dodds on many occasions before speaking at this committee. And I'm very interested in what our members on the other side have said about this late report. Obviously, Kerry has clarified that. But Karen has really sort of put my mind at rest, really, to say that, you know, it isn't set in stone and that we will get this further information. It will progress. And I think we have been waiting so long. You know, let's just start that process going. I'm you know, reassured by what our officers have said.
Thank you. Okay, so... Okay.
Chair, may I sum up then
Just
before
hang
the
on.
vote?
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, it's just a clarification on what Karen's just said. The actions which are in here are going ahead now. So there is no delay on any of the actions. So why don't we defer the report until we've got some of the measures to say that this is actually going to be having the impact that we want? Because there isn't a delay. Nothing we do now is going to make any difference to whether the actions which we think are going to work are happening, are they?
All actions are ongoing, that is true to say, but there is a desire from Ashbourne to have an action plan in place. So I am trying to ensure that further delays don't occur. It's true that the actions will happen, we'll get the extra information, but I think people want to see an action plan in place.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. Yes, again, I've been listening very carefully. If it were deferred, I'm right in thinking it would come back to this committee again for further scrutiny before it went to council. Would we not therefore be adding a slowing step in rather than hurrying the job along? Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to speak, Karen? Sorry, Karen.
Sorry. Shall I? Yeah.
I just wanted
Just
to go
to
back.
say, we need to do at least a 4-week consultation. Therefore, we have to build that timeline into the process. We then have to look at the comments and we have to draw a report together and bring that information back. So there would be obviously a delay in the process if we had to delay much further in doing the consultation.
Councillor Burford.
I just want to go back to Kerry's assurance about the committee report, the late submission of the updated report, and the fact that it wasn't available on the publicly accessible portal or website, apparently. So they were looking at August or September report rather than the updated one. Does that not make it, well, unfair to the public for a start, or members or people in Ashbourne who are probably interested in this committee and looking at the papers concerned before tonight's meeting?
Just one sec, Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, no.
Okay, well.
It's just a very quick observation. If you're looking at what report was put on the portal, I looked this morning and it was still, on the public portal, was still the September 2022. We've been given a copy of the October 2022. So all members of the public, all concerned people at Ashbourne, the Ashbourne town team, Mr. Dobbs, didn't have that information. I take your point, Kerry, what you're saying about the members, but this organisation should be bigger than the members, and it should be sent out to other people, to the community, that if they are interested, they should see the current documents. Thank you.
I'm going to admit, yeah, it is a little bit of a grey area, you know, in terms of this, because the paragraph that I read out before wasn't specifically for amended reports. This was just saying that completely new reports could be, you know, could be brought before a committee within the last, you know, with less than 5 working days' notice. So within the Constitution, it doesn't seem to specifically address the point of amended, you know, amended reports. So then I'll have to sort of bow to you as members to know whether you've had specifically enough time to, you know, to read the report, and do you feel as though you have had enough time to digest it and can reasonably, in all circumstances, take the decision that you've been asked to take tonight.
Councillor Purdy.
Chair, what I've just heard does concern me. I've not looked at the portal this morning, I must confess, but I take Councillor Wayne's word. It seems to me that Tom is not able to say to the contrary, so we have to take at face value what the members of the public have told us, and therefore the public interest comes first. So I'm going to go now with deferral on the basis that the public interest hasn't been served and needs to be done.
Councillor Hughes.
Can I just sum up then before, and then we can move to a vote? So I was moving that we defer for two reasons. The first reason was because it seemed natural to provide the facts associated, or the predictions from modelling, I should say, as well as the actions in the new proposed action plan for us, so Ashbourne residents can consult and can be consulted and will have reasonably realistic understanding of what the impact of the actions will be on air quality. I don't think that thank you, Councillor Purdy, for taking account of the second purpose of deferring. I think that I agree with you that it does improve democracy to if documents are in the public domain in a timely manner. I don't think there will be a delay because overall, because of in terms of the actions, because as you say, the actions are already being pursued. So there will be the consultation itself. Surely is not going to delay the actions taking place. It's just the publication of a report that it will delay. So I think for 4-week consultation following the publication of a report, which includes the modelling information, will be a better approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So it's been moved and seconded for deferral. All those in favour? Okay, that's been carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, Derbyshire Dales Local Development Scheme 2022 to 25.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Hopefully this is a fairly straightforward report for members to consider this evening. Essentially, we are required to prepare a 3-year timetable for the preparation of our planning policy documents. Following the report that went to Council in March of this year, where because of the extra work that Council resolved to agree to, we have now got a subtle change in the timetable that was agreed at that particular meeting, and the local development scheme, which is Appendix 1 to the report, reflects the timetable that was set out and agreed by Council back in March. What we're looking for tonight is approval from members to approve the local development scheme and to publish it on the website and bring it into effect with immediate effect.
Questions, members? Councillor Ratcliffe.
I just wanted to ask Mike, given within our work group strong comments that have been put forward about the nature of the consultation and public engagement process, whether there shouldn't be some indication within the timetable of that when these meetings are taking place. I know we've been given them, haven't we? 23rd of November is the beginning. Anyway, but I just wondered whether the public should be aware of them within the framework of this timetable, or do you think that's too?
The local development scheme is not necessarily meant to be a detailed line-by-line approach to what we're doing. It's essentially sort of the key stages of what we're doing, and what we've got in there is the sort of steps that address that. And as you'll see in there, there will be sort of draft modifications undertaken October 2023, and that's when we've done all of the initial work on the evidence-based update and also the work on the policy review side of things, and we'll pull them all together at that particular point in time. That will be the most substantive consultation exercise, really.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Just going through the risk management plan towards the end of the document on page 89 and 90. It says the provision of infrastructure is classed as medium. But obviously, as you're well aware, and people in planning will be, that a number of developments around here are falling currently short of the mark because of the lack of consultation with Severn Trent Water and the reliance on the existing local plan decisions then. But when you scratch away at the surface, it's there. Is that still, the first question is that still medium, or should it be, because I couldn't see anywhere in the document about any consultation with Severn Trent Water. The second question is, on page 89, having understanding with neighbourhood councils, that's classed as high concern. What has been done to date? I presume we're talking about the Peak Park predominantly, but what has been done to date with the Peak Park, and how concerned are you that they will maintain their historic position of limited development, therefore forcing Derbyshire Dales District Council that within their plan area to accommodate the district's housing allocation within 42% of its landmass? So that's pretty well 100% of the housing allocation within a 42% of its landmass. Thank you.
So I can come back on those two questions. In terms of infrastructure, clearly infrastructure is a very broad topic area. It's not just necessarily sort of the utility provision. So in looking at the risk assessment, what we're looking there at is the broad nature of infrastructure. So whilst there may well be adjustments that go along, that happen as we go along through the process that will need to be taken into account, generally I think I'm comfortable with that assessment still being maintained as medium. In terms of the neighbouring authorities, we have a legal duty, as members will be aware, to engage with them through the duty to cooperate. That process has begun. We've been starting to talk with all of the neighbouring authorities around Derbyshire Dales. The indications from the National Park are that they will continue with their sort of approach of maintaining a landscape defence, and therefore as a consequence of that, at the moment I don't see there being a significant change in their approach to the delivery of housing within their local plan policies, which will follow on from ours going forward.
Can I just come back very quickly? So, are we doing anything as an authority, like the ones adjoining South Downs, to actively canvass, well, write to the Minister of State, whoever it is this week, down in the Home Office or wherever, whoever it is, to put our case forward? Because how long are we going to be able to go forward building all these houses and infilling our towns, and adding onto our already at risk infrastructure? So is there anything that we are doing? I've written, but I've not received a reply yet. So has anybody else?
Well, Councillor Purdy wrote to one of the former ministers and got a very substantive reply, which was essentially saying that, at the current time, the policy is very much of protecting the national parks for their statutory purposes, and as a consequence that, if we were or wanted to try and encourage the national park to change it, then there would have to be a significant change in policy at a national level to make that happen effectively.
Just very quickly, sorry. I'm not saying to force the national park to build. They can do what they want up there.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is differentiation. Surely we should have to build 42% or 50% of our allocation because we can only build it on 42% of our land. Yeah. That's fair.
Well, Chair, this is a debate, I think, for another time, because I think it's an issue that will need to sort of have its airing at council when we get to the point where the local plan is considered through council, because council is the right body to determine that. But in terms of that particular issue, you know, members can, if they wish to do so, make decisions which they feel is appropriate. But clearly, we'll be giving them advice on what we feel is appropriate relative to the decisions that may be coming forward at that particular point in time. But the issue that I've said to members previously in this committee and at council is that the difficulties we've got is that the way in which the guidance is set out at the moment, the national policies, is that we effectively have to demonstrate how we're delivering all of the future needs for Derbyshire Dales. Now, we can do that in a number of different ways. We can either contain that within Derbyshire Dales and take account of what limited development might take place within the national park, or we could seek to reduce our requirements, but in reducing our requirement, we would then have to seek to deliver that outstanding amount somewhere else. And that's where we would have to have and engage with our neighbouring authorities through the duty to cooperate. And at that point in time, I think we'll then come up against a very brick wall, and we would end up in a situation where, because we fail to be able to demonstrate how we're delivering all our needs, we'll be in a position where we won't be able to demonstrate to Inspector a sound plan.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. Well, it's a message we've been banging since I've been a councillor, 2007. I'm sure Councillor Ratcliffe will say even longer, against the Peak Park. And in the first local plan, we were told quite categorically by government, you've got to get on with it. As Mike said, Mike wrote on my behalf to Chris Pincher when he was a minister, and he quite clearly put me in the frame of, you have to accept that the Peak Park has its own agenda and policies and will conform. I have a meeting soon with Chief Exec Paul Wilson, with the new Chief Exec of Peak District National Park, Mr Phil Mulligan, and we will do our best to push the boat out again on that same issue, see what his views are.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, in our economic plan, do we, and as a council, do we cover the Peak Park area, and do we advise businesses in the Peak Park area using our own consultants?
The simple answer to that, Councillor Hughes, is yes, with their Economic Development Authority for the whole of the District Council.
Right. Okay, thank you. And am I right in saying that the number of houses that are built is in some respects proportional to the number of jobs created?
The evidence that ICNI projects have prepared for us to date does suggest that, you know, the opportunities to deliver high levels of growth and provide the benefits by increased numbers of jobs does have a relationship with the number of houses, yes.
And in fact, in terms of the models that are used to determine the number of houses, clearly the models that we've used, there is a clear relationship between the number of houses that are needed in the forecast and the number of jobs that are being created. So we have a base level and two economic plans, as I understand it, and they have different number of jobs forecast, and as a consequence, they have different numbers of houses forecast. Now, would it be reasonable for us to tell the Peak Park that we are no longer going to support their aspirations for business development, because they won't take the number of people who the number of houses that economic development implies? And I feel that we can play hardball here by cutting off the Peak Park from the rest of the area and only use our consultants and our own capabilities and our own method of support just for the areas outside the Peak Park. Otherwise, we're cutting off our nose to spite our residents' faces. I have people in my ward that it looks as if there's going to be a planning application for a very beautiful valley between here and Tansley, I do not want that to happen because it is the most beautiful valley around here. It's the clear separation of a village of Tansley from Matlock, and I would not want that to happen. And if that is a consequence of us giving way on housing in the Peak Park, then I'm sorry, but I cannot support it. And I would go for a more aggressive approach, which says that we will stop advising and developing business in the Peak Park area.
I think, Councillor Hughes, that's a debate for another day, unfortunately.
Of course, yeah.
Councillor Buckler.
Yeah, I worked for the National Park Authority for 14 years. I'm a big fan of the National Park and think that it provides a fantastic part of green infrastructure. It's a nationally important landscape. You know, I think that we do damage to the national park at our peril, and it will be seriously detrimental for the residents of the Derbyshire Dales. However, I think our issue is us saying what we want to do is to, you know, I completely disagree with what David Hughes just said. I accept that we don't want to build the houses in Lumsdale, but it's the economic development strategy, pushing for the high growth economic development strategy is a significant issue when a large chunk of the district excludes itself from it. So,
Chair, can we move back to the agenda, because as my case says, this is a debate for another day, not this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I suppose I tend to agree with what Councillor Buckler has just said. But going back to Councillor Wayne's question about provision of infrastructure, I do think it should be high priority, high impact, because it's not just Severn Trent Water and the Environment Agency and so on, the surface water or foul sewage disposal from these developments, but it's school capacity as well. And there's been a lot of contradictions, in recent years about school capacity, and it's never been clear exactly what capacity is supposed to be accepted or rejected in the eyes of the Education Authority. In fact, we had news in the press only recently about a Ukrainian girl that couldn't be accommodated at Highfield School in Matlock and had to go to Tupton Hall instead. So we tended to wonder then, well, if the extra house is being built at the moment in Darley-Dale and the children of that age, 11, 12, whatever, are they not being accommodated at Highfields in the future either? So it is a question of, I know Section 106 agreements will give funding for extra classrooms and so on, but as I've said before, it's the threshold that concerns me. You know, they won't be building a new classroom at Highfield School or anywhere else in the district where housing numbers have increased until a certain point has been reached in terms of the funding of it. So I do think it should be high impact or high priority in terms of all infrastructure delivery, not just, well, I obviously endorse what Councillor Wayne has said about surface water and foul sewage and so on, but there are other things as well, highway infrastructure as well, of course, so I think that should move it from medium up to high in terms of the importance.
So I'll just stand by what I said before. I think when you take it across the board, when we've done the risk assessment, we've taken that as a sort of a broad sort of indication that, you know, infrastructure is an important part of what we've got to provide for. But in terms of the risk, when you take all the different types of infrastructure, some will be a little bit more easy to deliver, some will be a little bit more complicated, and some will be more risky. Therefore, putting it as a medium risk is an appropriate level to deal with it at this point in time.
Councillor O'Brien, before we start, is it a question? Because we are still in questions.
It's got a question mark at the end of it, Chair, yes.
Right, okay.
Well, I would say that I'm slightly more optimistic about the attitude of the National Park than some colleagues. My question, though, is that Councillor Purdy is quite often referred to a supplementary planning document produced under the Vision Derbyshire banner related to climate change. And I almost always agree with Councillor Purdy on planning matters. And Councillor Purdy has suggested that this document should come to this council for adoption. In that case, do we not think that it should be included in the development plan scheme?
Chair, it's not a development plan, so it's not a requirement for us to report it within the local development scheme. It's a non-statutory document.
Councillor Buttle.
Well, thank you. This is a more philosophical question, Mike. When we talk about climate change and planning for 2050, are you allowed, in the way you bring this document together in the longer term, to work in 2.5 billion mass migration by 2050 out of Africa, out of East Asia, out of South America, out of Central America? Do you actually have any way to take into account the pressures that we're going to be under in the longer term?
Chair, I can only go on the evidence that I have before me, which, you know, if there are elements of that taken into account, then that's taken into account in the calculations of our future housing requirements. I can't say to what extent those longer term calculations are taken into account, because at the moment the forecasts that we have only take us to 2040.
2040.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're thinking about what we're planning for, and most displaced people will be displaced internally within the UK, they won't be coming from Africa, they won't be coming from South America, they'll actually be coming from the south coast, or they're going to be coming from the east coast, the places where it's no longer livable. We're just not going to take any notice of that when we start thinking about how we're going to be planning for what happens to the people of this country in the future.
That, you know, as you sort of started off, that's a very philosophical question. But you know, at the end of the day, the way in which we prepare our planning policies is based upon the evidence that we have available to us, and the vast majority of that evidence comes from what the government published through the ONS.
We have the IPCC, though, don't we? And
Sorry?
the IPCC is actually a recognised organisation, and it does say what's going to be happening here and what we're going to have to deal with.
The Chair, point of order. I think we're getting into longevity of debate here, and I think we should move to the vote. This is surely just a note in this item.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I just sometimes think that maybe we're just taking things a little bit too casually. Thank you very much, anyway.
Right, Councillor Morley.
Yeah, thank you. It is a question, and it's to Mr. Hayes. He's already answered it. He's already given his opinion, his professional opinion once. I'd like him to reiterate it. If we were to borrow that lovely phrase, play hardball with the national park, what would be the result? You've already said it once. Would you tell us again?
I think we would end up, Councillor Morley, with a situation where we have a plan which is found unsound.
Okay then. Moving into debate. Do we have a proposer?
Chair, move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Finesse. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Thank you, that's been carried. Item 7, Public Spaces Protection Order, review of barbecues / open fires.
Sorry about that. I just want to cast members' eyes back to when we first started the consultation to look at the new PSPO, which finished last October. The consultation started in January 21 with members, and we moved to a very comprehensive consultation period with all parties, including statutory consultees such as the police and fire service, members of the public, and also we had the Farmers Union and town and parish councils. And in response to that consultation, we got an extraordinary amount of responses, which was over about 700. And in terms of that, we produced a plan and put that together to members, which was approved in April. Now, since then, we've been monitoring the fires and barbecues as it was requested at the time. We've done a piece of work consulting and making people, including parish and town councils, the National Farmers Union, members of the public, the police, everyone aware of how to report either in the event of or retrospectively in terms of seeing patches of grass or items that have been perished through fires or barbecues. And we've not received many responses, unfortunately, or fortunately, it could be seen as a positive thing, really. We've had 5 reports through directly to us with regards to that. Now, in terms of what we've done, it would really normally take 6 to 9 months for a consultation, and unfortunately, it's taken almost 23 months for the PSPO to be implemented last month. And what the recommendation in this report really is to say is that in terms of what we have introduced, it follows everything that we need it to do. If anything, it probably overstates more than what we are required to do in terms of evidence that's been supported. So in terms of the report today, it's outlining that we haven't had any substantial issues with regards to fires and barbecues over what has been a very hot summer, which you would deem that would have happened within Derbyshire Dales. And therefore, we're sort of recommending that the extent of the PSPO we monitor continually, as we are doing at the moment. We can provide information to members on a regular basis in terms of an annual email to keep them aware of what's going on and when it's happening. And such evidence that comes to light, we can make some changes or some consultation on changes on the PSPO. But until that time, the recommendation is that we just monitor it until 2025, until such time, if it does come to light that there are issues that need to be addressed. And there is a possibility now that we can extend it for a further 3 years. And instead of trying to go through the consultation again, which took quite a significant amount of resource to do so, and in terms of what we've implemented, it is working, then we would recommend that decision to extend for a further 3 years is with myself and colleagues in the police and fire service. I'm not sure if anyone, I'm sure there will be some questions or comments.
Question. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. And I know it's specifically about barbecues and open fires as such. But I want to ask you a question related to the text of the recommendation, because there seems to be a suggestion there that we are taking away the delegated responsibility, if you like, given to members of this committee to accept, review decisions, and indeed formulate amendments to policies. It just seems to suggest in the wording that what we are going to agree to, if we're not careful tonight, is to turn this all over to the neighbourhood's manager. I wonder if you could just be a little clear for me, and perhaps my colleagues too, about exactly what these recommendations entail in terms of the future scope and perhaps also the inclusion of specifics, because that's fairly broad. I don't see any mention of necessarily reviewing barbecues and open fires there. That seems to suggest it's the whole of the PSPO orders that are being given over. Perhaps that's what you intend, but...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it would be the whole order itself. I think what I'd like members to be reassured of is if anything changes in any aspect of the orders, that officers will obviously bring this information to members so that can be brought, a consultation can be started and changes could be made. But I think we haven't had a PSPO for almost a year, and in terms of members' concerns, which we took on board and understood, I think that concern hasn't come into fruition. I think what we need to encourage, and I know that other shops have started to prevent the sale of disposable barbecues. I think that's the direction things need to go. The PSPO is an element, but we haven't seen the evidence to say that this is required across in any other areas, or even maybe in some of the areas that we have included. But we understand, you know, that there was public and political want to have them included in L5 parks, which we have done that. However, the evidence we've had even in the last 6 months hasn't suggested it. So it would be for the whole PSPO in all elements. But if anything was to change of a significant, then it would be brought to members. And like I said, I'm more than happy to do like an annual report to members outlining what the outcome has been for the previous year. And if there's anything that's changed, or if anyone's got any questions or want to delve further, then we can do that in that forum. But to go through the process again, if nothing's really changed, it just seems very resource heavy, and it makes sense to have those discussions with those external partners who do support us in this as well.
But I would come back with a very perhaps rhetorical question. Do you not feel that even though you're evidencing a relatively small number of incidents that have occurred and been reported, nevertheless, in terms of the wider public, as you've just evidenced yourself, there is a feeling that there should be a ban on the use of these portable barbecues, hence their withdrawal in many quarters for sale. Therefore, to some degree, it would be in order for us to follow that very sensible sentiment that is being expressed by the public. Notwithstanding the number of evidential responses that have come in.
In terms of the legislation, evidence is a really big key part of what, you know, implementing a restriction on a public area. There has to be evidence to support it. And at the moment, there isn't any evidence to support that. I can appreciate that, you know, members of the public feel like it's a requirement. However, we don't have an enforcement team within the council. We have a small number of people that go about doing some enforcement work in hotspot areas, particularly around dog fouling, in areas which we obviously haven't been able to do for the last 11 months. And then, you know, in terms of fires and barbecues, there is no enforcement of that. So a PSPO is not going to resolve that. It is, you know, preventing the sale of disposable barbecues. That's going to have more of an impact. So I appreciate that members of the public feels like it is a good idea. However, the evidence just doesn't substantiate it, basically. So it is that balance, but we have to go with the evidence in front of us.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this comprehensive report. I found it very helpful, and I noted the comment from the National Park Authority that we were lucky, and I found that's an interesting word to use. We were lucky that there were not more detrimental effects of wildfires and barbecues on our natural environment. So my question is, in that context, that there were 26 reported incidents involving barbecues or campfires during the period from April to September. That's an average of 1 a week. Do you still agree with your previous assertion that barbecues and campfires are not a significant problem in terms of the potential impact on the natural environment in the district?
Thank you. I'll take that, Chair. In terms of the fires, it doesn't really give you an example of the extent of those fires. They're not in areas that we would patrol. We need to finely balance what we can deliver and with the evidence. So even if there was a PSPO in that location at that time, it doesn't mean to say, well, it wouldn't have prevented that fire from taking place. So I don't feel I can stand by this report and say that there isn't a significant issue in the Derbyshire Dales with regards to barbecues and open fires. I noted in Sarah Wilkes's comments as well, she said the hotspot for this continues to be Stanton Moor. I've been trying to engage with the landowner of Stanton Moor to try and finalise signage, and they haven't been very forthcoming to be able to do that. So in terms of signage going up Stanton Moor, I'm not sure when that's going to take place. It will depend on responses from the landowner with regards to that.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, that there were 23 incidents not on Stanton Moor.
But they weren't on land that was ours. And in terms of those 23 incidents, it still doesn't suggest that's a significant issue within the Derbyshire Dales.
Okay, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, it was a question about Stanton Moor, and it was actually I was going to ask about the signage on Stanton Moor, as the parish council are very concerned about what's happening there, because there are fires there all the time. They may not get reported, but there are, the parish council are reporting to me fires on Stanton Moor all the time. Is there anything that I can do to help with the correspondence with the landowner? Because if that's what the issue is, then I'm quite happy to say that to the parish council. But that's the first that I've heard of that.
I was there on Sunday in hailstones, rain, sun and shine for a period of time in Stanton Moor, and there was a fire that previous night, and there was a patch of grass which I've made a note of. I'm not sure whether there is anything. I'm more than happy for you to, if you've got contacts, to be able to sort of encourage that dialogue. That would be really helpful. I did notice there was a new sign there that I hadn't seen previously at the weekend, which was discussing about preventing barbecues and fires. It did look relatively new, but it's not. It doesn't have any of the legislation on, and it's not something we've produced. So I don't know if they've gone ahead with their own sign at this stage.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. Well, one who's policed signs all my life, mainly, I've found that public mainly don't take any notice of signs, lots of speeders and going up wrong way streets, so I'm not convinced that signs is the answer here. I'm very encouraged to hear that there's many supermarkets such as M&S and Lidl and others are now banning the sale, and I've said all along the only answer to this is to ban at source sale. Picking up on Councillor Ratcliffe's point, I did raise that question with Vicky this afternoon, so I wonder if some extra wording, Vicky, to the recommendation along the lines of, in the event that incidents related to any, just bear with me, put my glasses on, not used to wearing them. In the event that incidents related to any elements of the PSPO give rise to cause for concern, then members will be notified accordingly. A report on PSPO incidents shall be published annually.
Yeah, and
would that help Councillor Ratcliffe's point?
Would you be happy with
Happy
those
with that.
recommendation?
That if there are any incidents that give rise to cause of concern, the report will come back to this council. So in other words, the officers keeping monitoring it.
My only anxiety is that we don't, in haste, take away some of the decision-making responsibility of this.
No,
I'm happy under certain circumstances to delegate duties out to officers, but I just feel in this particular instance, there's no reason whatsoever for a report not to come back here and for us to make the decisions as to whether or not we're going to change policy detail.
I see 2 points here, Chair. One is that if there are any increase in incidents, then obviously Vicky would report them anyway, but I think it needs to be covered in the wording. And then the second is that I think it wouldn't hurt for an annual report on incidents just for the information of members.
Yeah.
Put those wording in. Somebody polish my wording up.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Statham.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick, simple question. Does the barbecues and open fires, does that also mean Chinese lanterns? Because they are a serious blight, serious problem.
No.
It doesn't specify Chinese lanterns, no, but it does specify anything lit, open lit, like a cigarette or lighter or anything like that. But yeah. So it would be within that, but not specified. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine's quite a simple question, really. In terms of paragraph 210 with regard to dog fouling, and we don't have Stanton Moor in All Saints Ward, nor any sort of wild camping generally, but dog fouling is a serious problem. And when you say 126 reports, that presumably means individual complaints, does it? Not necessarily, right, okay. So, I mean, are you really saying that anyone that does experience that on a regular basis should submit complaints to yourself and the District Council right away? Because obviously, I think there's a similar period in 2021, 197 reports. Well, I don't think I've noticed necessarily less of the problem being reduced in the last, in the current year. So I think we need to make sure that people do complain about it on a regular basis, so we have a realistic impression of what the problem is in our mainly urban areas, I would say.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have a report it web form on the website for dog fouling and littering. So, yeah, and that information helps us direct our patrols because we're limited on time and resource. We want to go in the areas where the problem is most of issue. So, absolutely. And if anyone receives anything to do with fires, barbecues, dog fouling, then please do pass it on to us because the information we receive is very little.
Councillor Rose.
I have to support Severn Trent Water, particularly at Carsington. Last year, obviously, we didn't have a drought, and they welcomed barbecues. They even had, stands where you could put your barbecue. But this year, obviously, we've had this scorching hot weather. The rangers were very active. I mean, I witnessed one night when 20 people arrived with their portable barbecues, and the rangers were immediately out, asking them to take them away and actually to leave the site. So it's very important, obviously, that we work with our partners.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask whether Councillor Purdy's suggestion was an amendment to the motion. And if so, I'd be happy to second it.
I don't see it as an amendment, Councillor. It's just adding words, which, if everyone agrees with, I'm sure is acceptable. Just adding words to the present recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, so no more questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, I know what Councillor Spurgeon and Councillor Hughes have said about an annual report, but I am just a bit conscious of the workload on the officers. Pardon?
Not to come to report, not to come to council.
Not to come to council. So I just wanted to make sure that I know it's an awful lot of hard work for you doing this, but are you happy to just bring forward?
Absolutely, I'm more than happy. I think it's right that you know what's going on in the district. I'm more than happy to circulate that every year. It's not a problem at all.
Okay, so we'll move into debate. Councillor Purdy?
Move the recommendation with the additional words I've given. Are you happy with the
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just that find a seconder. Councillor Hughes? Okay. Anyone else like to speak in debate? Councillor O'Brien?
I've listened carefully to concerns expressed by Councillor Ratcliffe and Councillor Purdy. I'm also refer back to the fact that, as we've heard, there were over 700 responses to the original consultation, which I think shows the degree of interest which our residents have in this issue. And PSPO is not just about barbecues and campfires. I know we've spent an eternity discussing that aspect of it, but it covers a whole range of areas in which we seek to prevent various forms of antisocial behaviour. Now, wherever we are on the political spectrum here, I think each of us agrees that it's members who make policy and it's officers who implement it for us. We've had an offer, but here we have a proposal that we switch that round. We're now saying that we will delegate decisions on policies on future PSPO to our officers. At the same time, we have a suggestion that we should have an annual report which comes to us, which I think is fine. The reason, there was no justification in the report, I have to say, as to why we should take away the policy-making role of members and transfer it to officers. And we've heard a reason that it appears to be a lot of work for members, and I understand why they've got rather tired of the debates we've had over the past couple of years on this. But two things. If we're now saying that we're going to ask officers to produce as an annual report on PSPOs, how is that any different from when it comes to the expiry of 3 years, that they come to us with a report on whether or not the PSPO should be extended, whether it should be amended, etc., etc., and then we can have a debate. I would therefore want to put forward an amendment, in fact, that on the basis that policy decisions on whether in 2025 our PSPO should be extended or amended is something which we as members need to take responsibility for, with advice from our officers. That is what we're elected to do on behalf of not just the 700 respondees to our consultation, but in respect of all our residents. And I think it's a matter of principle here, as I said, that we as members take responsibility for policy decisions. And this is an important policy decision because it affects the way of life of 76,000 residents. So I want to put forward an amendment that we delete all words after October 2025, Chair. I think I've given you notice of this amendment prior to the meeting, which you may like to read out for the benefit of colleagues.
Right, we need to vote on the first, unless there's anything further to add to debate.
Could I ask that you read out the amendment that I submitted to you, Chair?
Yeah. If recommendation 1 to the above item is moved at this evening's meeting, I wish to give notice of an amendment which I wish to move. Delete all words after until 2025. I anticipate that one of my colleagues copied into this email will second. I would be grateful if you will inform the Chair at the beginning of the consideration of this item. Okay. The amendment, Councillor Ratcliffe, is... Yeah, the amendment is that all words after until 2025 are deleted.
The recommendation is that officers continue to review matters until 2025. That's it.
Yeah, that's.
Yes, I think we review, we receive annual reports, and then a decision on whether to amend or extend the PSPO in 25 comes back to this committee for consideration.
Okay. Well, we need to vote on the first proposal. Okay. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? No. This is. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair. Point of order. We always vote on amendments first.
Yeah. I'm just taking advice from legal. Yeah, we've got a substantive motion on the table that's been seconded. That's.
It's already seconded.
I'm happy to second it, that we go up to the 2025. I do understand the report situation, but I also think it is important that we have consultation, and members are able to give their assessment and over the thing. But I'm happy to second it, and my understanding is that we vote on the amendment first. And if that fails, then we go back to the substantive.
Yeah.
Amendment first. Amendment first, definitely.
Yeah, but that's not what we're telling you.
Well, the
Well, the first one's been amended anyway because the wording's been amended. So there's been.
amendment first. Yeah, amendment first. Amendment first all the time. Always.
Right.
Okay. Okay, then we'll vote. We'll vote on the amendment then. All those in favour of the amendment? Seven.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. All those against? Seven. So I get the casting vote. Well, I vote against the amendment. So it's failed. So we're back to the substantive. So all those in favour? No. All those against? Okay, so that's carried. You're abstaining, yeah, it's still carried. Okay, we've got that. Okay. 9 forward and 1 abstain. Yeah. You can pass that back to Andrew because I've got that. Okay, then moving on. Item 8, regeneration capital projects. Steve.
Chairman, thank you very much. This is essentially two parts to the report, and they're both positive. One element is about the Levelling Up Fund, and this is being optimistic. We haven't yet heard whether we will receive Levelling Up funding or not. The government hasn't made its mind up on that, but we expect it to sometime in the next month or so, but planning ahead on the basis that if we are allocated, we need to have authorisation to receive and spend the money and enter into agreements accordingly. So this report is seeking authorisation to do so. It's also seeking authorisation to spend the remainder of the £300,000 capacity funding which you allocated in February. About 226,000 of that has been spent or committed so far, and we intend to spend the rest on survey work in preparation for, in anticipation of a positive grant announcement soon. So that's about Levelling Up funding. Essentially, it wants us to be able to hit the ground running when and if we get a positive announcement for Ashbourne Reborn. The other element of the report is about regeneration project pipeline. You'll recall that one of the reasons that Ashbourne was successful in going forward for the Levelling Up Fund was that the Ashbourne town team had done a lot of initial work, which we then had to do some work to refine further before it could be submitted. We'd like other towns to be in a similar position with similar schemes that suit them to be able to put them forward for government funding bids in future. So we've proposed some criteria for some limited district council help to develop some further capital infrastructure regeneration projects in town centres. To be noted that in order to have a chance of winning government funding in future, we know that they will need to be at scale. That's the phrase that the government use. And also to be noted, there's only a limited amount of funding we're recommending to put forward for this, which is £50,000 from the Economic Development Reserve. that would be not to actually conduct any projects, it would be to conduct development works to get projects bid ready, essentially. So that would include work such as detailed design using architects, it would include detailed costings using quantity surveyors, and detailed business cases using economic consultants, the sorts of things essentially that we have had to do up until July, between February and July, with the Ashbourne proposals in order to bring them forward. So having done that, that would leave a relatively small amount in the Economic Development Reserve. I'm grateful to Councillor Buttle and Councillor O'Brien, who raised some questions that Councillor Buttle kindly circulated earlier on, which I'm hopefully can deal with regard to some rural issues. And I am very conscious of the fact that we have explicitly focused the pipeline proposals here on town centre schemes at scale to use the government funding. And that is, as I've said, those are the types of projects that the government will be looking at in future rounds of funding. So if we were to develop projects that aren't likely to suit government criteria, we wouldn't be using our money wisely. Just to confirm, however, that we do have an alternative source of funding which can help smaller schemes in rural areas and in villages and smaller towns, including Tideswell. And that is the Community Resilience Grant that members approved back in July as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So members agreed to put in place that Community Resilience Grant scheme for community and voluntary organisations, social enterprises, town and parish councils, for projects aimed at strengthening local communities, fostering local pride, back in July, and that went forward to government as part of our UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan, which again we haven't heard back about, but it's not a bid, it's one that they only need to sign off. So they don't, the money is ours, they just need to sign it off. Now we've got a minister, hopefully that won't be too long. But the sorts of things that the Community Resilient Grant would potentially look at would be maintaining key services and facilities and community infrastructure in villages. It would be to deliver community-led projects and indeed to take local action on climate change. And we, as members, we put £100,000 allocated to that scheme. And a draft invitation to tender has been prepared. There's a meeting of the Shared Prosperity Fund Partnership Board tomorrow, which will hopefully allow that invitation to tender to be put forward. So we are looking after rural schemes and rural areas as well. But just to go back then to the recommendation here, which is specifically with regard to the capital town centre pipeline regeneration projects, it's in line with the feasibility studies, the Henmore Brook Walk scheme. You've got the details of attached to the agenda. A similar scheme was promoted in Matlock back in June. So it's following along those sorts of initiatives, but it's up to other towns to come up with what's appropriate to them. Already started conversations with Wirksworth Town Council about that, got another meeting planned this week. So the Deputy Town Clerk's mother has just reminded me, and we are, open to discussions with other councils as well. Just to clarify one further thing, members, this is entirely in line with council's existing policy. Promoting investment to stimulate the economy of our market towns is a corporate plan priority, and it is within the council's 2020 economic recovery plan already. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
You're being very generous with me this evening. I commend your optimism, by the way, in terms of the monies that might be available through the LUF, particularly in light of the thoughts that have been echoed in the press and elsewhere about what we might face on the, what is it, the 17th of November. I've asked this question that I'm going to ask you again, just for the benefit of perhaps others that weren't at the meeting. you will remember a meeting with consultants, etc., where I asked you whether there was any plan B, as it were, or contingency funding that might be drawn upon so that projects that were being formulated would not fall completely flat on their face should the government not come up with the monies. Could you just again just sort of comment on that and give some reassurance that all the hard work that you and others have put into this will not come to naught should the government say we can't afford to be so lavish with our levelling up?
Well, you know, I would make the case that the government can't afford not to fund Ashbourne, but nevertheless, if that unfortunate eventuality was to occur, there is to some extent a plan B, but not a complete one. So the two areas where there is some match funding already in place is from the County Council for the road, highways improvements and footway widening scheme in St John Street and Dig Street, Compton area. They have got some of their own capital funding to put towards that already. It wouldn't be as lavish a scheme as I suppose we would hope to get through levelling up funding, but some of that would go ahead. And also the Methodist Church have some of their own funding to put towards the community hub development. So the cafe and link and meeting rooms that they will be planning to go there could go ahead, but again it wouldn't be as integrated with the town centre as we would get with the levelling up fund bid. In terms of the other elements, there at the present is no funding available, or very little anyway, for the public realm elements, and to some extent that's why we've put in the report that it would be, you know, putting money, this 50,000, having it available for other projects would be dependent on the outcome of the levelling up fund bid. If we weren't successful with levelling up fund bid, we might come back to members. We would come back to members, but one of the things we might need to consider at that point is you know, did we need to spend some of that relatively small sum on some of the levelling up fund projects?
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. Having had the pleasure of working with Dr. Capes on regeneration for some years, it's always a joy to get his reports in the hope that I can find something to improve it. I can't, so I would like to get a motion on the table that we accept the report as written, but reserve the right to come back into the debate. Thank you, Chair. Motion's on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Wayne. Okay, thank you. I'd already seen him. Anyone else? Okay, no more questions? Okay, we'll go into debate. Councillor O'Brien.
I like the style of the report, and I liked Steve Capes' introduction to it. And as he said, it is a mixture of a series of practical and sensible steps to manage our current regeneration initiatives, which I fully support. And then, secondly, proposals to prioritise support for future capital funding bids, which I have to say I don't support. It's on this latter aspect which I want to talk. As Steve says, recommendation 2 explicitly implies that only four towns are four market towns in the district out of 70 communities stand to receive any support for any future regeneration capital projects. This is on the basis that there appear to be a number of pipeline projects. As far as I can see, the only pipeline projects which have been identified are a bit more public realm in Ashbourne and some community space in Matlock. Now, I don't decry those as projects, but I have to say I'm not convinced that either of those have any great economic value, shall we say, in terms of output. However, that's for discussion at another time. What I think is unfortunate is that if we agree to the recommendation 2 as it stands, we're failing to recognise that there may well be other regeneration priorities throughout the rest of the district. If I could give 3 examples, we have Matlock Bath as a major tourist hub. It may well be that if we involved our stakeholders in discussions, that there would be tourist development projects, infrastructure projects, which could come forward. We know in much of the district that the key hindrance to enterprise development is our standard of broadband capacity and connection. That's the single most important issue which gets in the way of business expansion in much of the district. Likewise, we're aware that a major hindrance to our climate change agenda is the inadequacy of our electric grid infrastructure, which is preventing investment in a whole range of climate change related initiatives to do with solar farms or electric vehicle charging points. The list goes on. So in agreeing to a proposal which restricts any work to 4 market towns, we're in danger of ignoring, without any consideration, a whole range of other key economic and probably social and environmental considerations. And I think that is remiss. That is remiss of us as an authority responsible for the economic, social and environmental well-being of the whole district, not just our 4 market towns. The issue of resources has quite rightly been raised, but I think resources follow priorities, not the other way around. It's for us to set our priorities and then we look to provide the resources necessary to deliver them. The Levelling Up Fund is not an urban fund. It is a fund available to level up economic, social and environmental disadvantage. And levelling up applies within the district as much as it does within the country. And we need to recognise that there will be some parts of the district which do need more levelling up than other parts. Again, it would be remiss of us not to do that. So with that in mind, I want to put forward an amendment to recommendation 2, which again, Chair, I've forwarded to you before the meeting. I'll read it myself and you may like to repeat it. That is, delete recommendation 2 on the agenda there and replace it with the words that a review of the Council's regeneration strategy, economic, social and environmental, is undertaken in consultation with partners and stakeholders in order to determine the priority for future capital funding bids and the allocation of resources to support their development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, Councillor O'Brien produces some excellent and interesting points, and ones that we, as a committee, should take into consideration. But I think I'd like to ask Mr. Cape some questions about the two examples, and also about the scope of funding before we debate the amendment, if it gets a seconder. So, Steve, the first point is assigning the £50,000 and the other amount to this particular, to the 4 market towns. Does that preclude investing in other schemes elsewhere? The second question is, Councillor O'Brien mentioned two utility improvement schemes, broadband and the power distribution network. Are those two examples within scope of the funding that the national funding that we are trying to access through this agenda item? Thank you.
Thank you, and if I may, Chairman, thank you. The £50,000 is for schemes that come forward under this scheme. So pipeline schemes that come forward that need some development support from the District Council. That in no way precludes other towns or villages or hamlets putting forward their own schemes. That whilst we would not be putting funding into developing those schemes, if they're good schemes, we'd certainly support them and help to put them forward. So whilst the £50,000 is for those 4 market towns to bid to, if you like, if other good schemes come forward from other areas, then we would support them, not with the same development funding, but if schemes come forward for large-scale capital infrastructure that's already developed, then yes, of course we would. Why wouldn't we want to support those? In terms of the infrastructure points, broadband is a very good issue. I know less about the electric grid infrastructure other than to agree with the weakness issue. Broadband, however, there is the government's gigabit funding programme, which is in fact already doing some work in the Derbyshire Dales. I had an update from this not long ago from partners at the County Council, and I'm struggling to find the exact numbers in front of me now, but there is a gigabit funding scheme which by 2025 is aiming to get, oh, there we go. So at it's aiming over the next 3 years to address 55,000 rural properties in the Derbyshire Dales and High Peak to get them gigabit enabled. So that's already underway through Digital Derbyshire and the government scheme there.
So, sorry, can I come back then? I mean, the £50,000 is, we're ring fencing it just to go for LUF type schemes. Is that correct? Well, I don't really understand what we're ring fencing it for.
So, yes, I suppose being optimistic, it's for government funding schemes that might come along at the moment. To be clear, there is no further LUF scheme that we're aware of, but when government does come up with funding streams, it's inevitably they're looking for big bang for their bucks. So it would be projects at scale that we can submit. With the other sorts of smaller schemes, we could put time and money into investing them, but if they aren't going to have a chance of getting onto the government's radar, there will be no point in doing so. What we're trying to do here is back winners, to put it rudely.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at is what we are constraining ourselves to in this, and I think that's the point that Peter O'Brien is making. What are we actually constraining ourselves to by saying it's the 4 market towns? For example, if it was a electricity distribution network, it might just putting in a new substation might be millions of pounds, and that might not happen, and that might be necessary for 100. I don't know what a large vehicle charging point, or for a large solar farm, and are we saying that there isn't that we would not be able to fund that, even though they may be in a rural area rather than in the middle of Matlock, for example?
The sorts of projects we're looking at here, Councillor Hughes, are the to use the crude term, LUF type projects, i.e. town centre, economic regeneration, place making, I suppose, schemes, rather than national infrastructure, through which other funding routes are generally available. And I've mentioned, you know, the gigabit scheme for broadband. We as a council have been very successful in applying for public sector decarbonisation money for you know, other initiatives as well. So this is for the sorts of economic regeneration, town centre schemes specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question for Steve on point 2, but before I'd just like to read what I'm looking on the internet, and it says the Levelling Up Fund is designed to invest in infrastructure that improves everyday life across the UK. The £4.8 billion fund will support town centre and High Street regeneration, local transport projects and cultural and heritage assets. So that confirms what Steve's saying. It's not that we're ignoring other than towns, because there are other funds for that. Councillor O'Brien has inferred that recommendation 2 doesn't hit the point, Steve. I'd just like your thoughts on that, please. Is it necessary for this amendment, or are we covered in what he infers is missing in that inference?
Well, it's for members to decide on amendments, but recommendation 2 was put forward, and that the criteria in the template were put forward and were developed very, very thoughtfully and specifically in mind to get schemes which A, have already undergone some thought and development. It's not just a wish list. B, it's projects which will, if supported, be likely to have a good chance of getting government funding further down the line. So we have oven-ready or bid-ready projects. And then the criteria that are set out in Appendix 1 are the, if you like, the meat and the detail that goes with it. I think we have to bear in mind, councillors, that when government funding schemes come along, they often don't give us very much time. Therefore, the sorts of things that we're trying to put forward are things that will, you know, with some work, and £50,000 isn't a lot of work, but with some work would enable them to hit the mark and you know, hopefully have success. You know, I'm optimistic that Ashbourne will have success. There's a lot of work going on in Matlock. I'd like that to be replicated in other towns as well, but to do so, some pump priming is necessary, and that's what is in the template criteria that recommendation 2 refers to.
Can I just aid colleagues with some clarification? I gave I gave 3 examples, but another, if you like, another more down-to-earth example would be that I'm certainly aware that many of our larger communities outside of the 4 market towns are running out of spaces for enterprises to expand into. We used to call them industrial parks, but enterprise parks, but it's that sort of accommodation. We're running out of that. It's it should be, in my view, as an authority, we should be looking across the board at our places to say, is that true? Could we put together a proposal, in addition to town centres, which says each of our centres where we look to promote enterprise and economic development, are they short of the infrastructure which will enable them to do that? That's what I'm saying. We need to have that opportunity. In fact, we should look ourselves at all those communities and saying, are there circumstances, are there infrastructure deficiencies which are hindering enterprise development? That is really what this is saying. We're putting all our eggs into one basket, or 4 baskets, if you like, and we're not allowing ourselves the opportunity to look outside that basket. It may well be that if you got all those communities together, they themselves would put together a proposal which would be of scale and value and of interest to the government. But in practice, they're not going to do that. Hartington is not going to talk to Darley-Dale spontaneously. That doesn't happen. It requires the catalyst of ourselves as a proactive Economic Development Authority to do that. So that's the purpose of this amendment, to give us the opportunity, while we're working on a new corporate plan, which is looking at whether the current priorities are the correct ones, and using evidence from our communities to see whether, in fact, there are infrastructure deficiencies which are getting in the way of development outside of our 4 market towns.
Chairman, if I may just respond to some of those questions, queries, I'm not sure. Firstly, as part of the strategic housing and employment land availability study, we did put out a call for employment sites, which is still live, and very little came forward in that regard. Secondly, in terms of our economic priorities, we did review them, and indeed many members were very positive in turning up for member workshops about that when we were looking at the UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan earlier on this year. Not only did members participate, but we also reviewed that with our stakeholders and partners as well, as a result of which we got a really good UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan, and the consultants who helped us put that together say it's much more detailed and much better quality than the typical things that they've seen elsewhere. So I think members can be proud of the work that they and their officers and partners participated in to doing that work only this summer. But I think the key point I'd make is that the UK Prosperity Fund, Shared Prosperity Fund, is there as well. There's something like £2 million there for the council. An investment plan has been approved by you, and that will, in their own good time, be approved by the government. And that does include funds for business support. It includes funds for developing sites. Councillor O'Brien has rightly mentioned industrial expansion sites, which is a key issue for the Derbyshire Dales. He's hit the nail on the head. And part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan is getting some funds together already for pump priming in that regard, to do some work to try and bring sites forward. And as well as that, there is that work for the rural communities, the Matlock, Bath, the Tideswell, and our other 70 or 80 towns and villages too, under the Community Resilience Grant, for them to come forward with the schemes that are right for their area too, which probably not for me or us to say. Those should come bottom up from the local communities. So that's already there, members. This isn't, the report that's in front of you today is an adjunct to that. It isn't the economic development strategy, it's an adjunct to it. It's an addition to enable us to get ready for some future funding bids. Whilst that's happening, all this other work's going on as well. The Shared Prosperity Fund is the meat and bones of our economic development work over the next 2 or 3 years. That's already been approved by members only recently, with some good work by partners, consultants as well. And it covers a lot of the things which Councillor O'Brien has very, very rightly raised.
Does Councillor O'Brien's amendment find a seconder? Councillor Buckley. Okay, so we'll vote on the amendment first. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? So that amendment's fallen, so we'll go back to the substantive vote. Councillor Morley, you wanted to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity again. Yes, and I listened very carefully and with great interest to that, and I'm very grateful for that input. However, it hasn't altered my opinion in any way, and I wish to reaffirm my movement of the report as written, all 6 recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, it's very laudable what Councillor O'Brien says, but I think we're not compartmentalising this properly. I think you're, what's the word, confusing us, in a sense. Of course, we've got aspirations in that area, but it's got to be to fit the criteria by government on the LUF. And I've read out what the LUF speaks of, and therefore we are stuck with that policy. But as Steve said, I'll report back to all members after the UK Shared Prosperity Fund meeting tomorrow, which I'm sure you'll find very encouraging in this area. I think what it speaks of is probably, as I've just written a bit of a draft nonsense, which I've submitted to my Deputy and the Chief Exec, on my thoughts on the future of this authority, and that is that on the lessons learned from the LUF fund, the government suddenly drops something on you and you're not ready, you're not prepared, they don't give you enough time. So using my Boy Scout background, be prepared. That's all I'm saying, really. And I don't think it's for us to tell local areas what to do. Matlock Bath has a kick. It has a Matlock Bath Development Association community interest company, of which I'm a member, and Joyce Borley-Blesser was also. And they have plans for Matlock Bath, indeed they do, and I'm sure other areas do. But it's up, as Steve says, it's up to those local areas to come forward with those plans. And I'm sure if you want a regeneration scheme, Peter, or whatever you want to call it in your area, it's up to you and your other CIS members to come forward and present to the council so that our officers can then see if it fits the criteria for whatever grant fund is available at the time.
Okay, anybody else want to speak in debate? Sorry? No, we voted on the amendment. Yeah. Does Councillor Morley's proposal find, did you second it, Councillor Purdy? You did. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? You've got 6, 7, 7 here, so that's 13. Yeah. Against? Abstentions? That's carried, thank you. Right, moving on to item 9, Event Strategy 2022 to 25. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. This report is recommending to use the event strategy for 22-25 with the revised changes that are outlined in the report and highlighted in the strategy. These really are making rules clear that we already follow, so they have been in place for some time, but they're making them official and making event organisers see them before they approach us. And they are mainly the use of drones for recreational use, animals with the specific inclusion of goldfish, use of prizes on fair, which is something members have been in contact with us as the events team for quite often in the last few years. When we do allow fireworks and when we wouldn't. And then one omission from the strategy, which we would like to add, if approved by members tonight, and this was discussed earlier, not since this meeting, but is the banning of Chinese lanterns from events, and also sort of helium plastic balloons that may be let go into the sky as a package, not the cartoon ones that people walk around and sell at events, but those that release into the sky. So we wouldn't allow them from our lands, which we wouldn't now anyway. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? Councillor Wayne.
It's an observation to start with and then a question, and it'll be quick. I'd just like to thank Dave. He's worked and his team have worked really hard at Matlock Bath over the last few months, for the last few weeks for the illuminations, and it's been a credit to him and this council that it's gone so well. So thanks very much for that. The question is, do we have an ethical policy on what people sell on our land? Because I just think that as we move forward, and we could be restricting fur, and you can restricting bone products and all sorts of different things like this. But do we have an ethical policy on what we actually allow our, the stalls to be used on our land? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of events that aren't ours, and event organisers come to, if they're holding a market, for example, a Christmas market, then we don't generally get involved with what items they're selling. If we get complaints or we get comments made, then we do feedback that back in terms of the next time they do an event. So if, for example, upcoming Christmas markets, if we've had issues with certain items, which we have had in the past, raised to us, then we will clarify when they do it again that it's not to include, based on what the complaint was and whether we feel it's suitable or not. But generally at the moment we wouldn't get involved with things like fur as of yet.
But do you think because it's using our land, is it something that we should be looking at? That's all I'm saying. I mean, I've received a complaint from Bakewell Market about some knives a few months ago. I'm still waiting for a reply on that one. But the actual somebody who's selling knives and a parent of a child that had been, a young person that had been stabbed, you know, raised an issue in relation to that. So it is concerning. Is it something that you could look at, do you think? Is that something that you could do? With your many other things you have to do, of course.
Yeah, we can certainly look at it. I mean, in a situation with knives, so we have had instances in the past where people have been selling hunting knives and we do remove them, and we have also removed them from markets that aren't ours or run by us and said we're not allowing that to be sold off our land. The question in relation to Bakewell Market is generally kitchen knives, and you know, you can go and get them in the shops and they are a normal product to be sold, you know, available. It's more ensuring they follow the regulations in terms of Challenge 25, correct signage and things like that, that we need to encourage and make sure people are doing.
All right, thanks very much.
Councillor Finesse.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question, Dave, it's on page 165, it's Appendix L. I'm a bit confused by the pricing you've got there. The allowance for mortgage directors is £11.38 per hour, and yet for empty litter bins or litter picking, it's £17.20. It should be the other way around, you know. I would have thought the mortgage directors were more skilled than litter pickers. But presumably there's a good reason for it.
It generally depends. Well, firstly, then fees are provided to us by the Clean and Green team of what they would charge in recovery of wage. For market store directors, it's done generally from people who are available or taken out of their time. The litter picking, if it is generally an overtime spend cost included.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I've thanked Dave before and his team, but I want to go on record again to thank Dave and his team for the excellent work. Like Councillor Wayne said, they do a fantastic job. It was a pleasure for my wife and I to open the illuminations this year and to give away the prizes. So I want recording our huge thanks to the boat builders, because we've said it so often, but it is a fact. Without the boat builders, there would be not as good illuminations. We do need to encourage people to come and become boat builders. That's a worry that the boat builders have got, because they're, like all of us, ageing process. But I also want to pass on thanks from Councillor Wakeman. He's not able to be here tonight. He's hoping to come back soon. But he wants to especially thank you, Dave, for the aspect of the Royal British Legion and that sort of work. So thank you.
Councillor Buttle.
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah. It's all absolutely excellent. The only thing that I've noticed that it was missing, and it's something that's been raised by Tidal Wakes Committee in the past, is the option to request recycling bins. I know there is complication in the fact that people at events aren't terribly great at putting stuff in the right bin, and we may need to check it over. But I was wondering if in the longer term we could actually look at the option of offering recycling for events, so that people want to recycle in general, and we're not in a position to offer that. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. We can provide bins, and event organisers can use them for what their purpose they want to, and they would have. The problem is the council doesn't have a recycling. You know, we would have to pay Serco for recycling removal bins rather than the council being able to do that provision themselves. So it would be no different for an event saying, I want to do recycling at our event. We can hire the bins. We do occasionally get requests for hire of bins. They can use them as recycling bins, but they would need to arrange for them to be taken away. The difficulty comes that most event trade waste is basically what it would come down to, and they would need to, you know, and you can get, you know, Serco or other companies to take away the trade waste in recycling, but it would need to be sorted first.
Right, okay. Next time, next weeks, I'll be in touch to ask you exactly who it is I need to be talking to. Thanks very much, Dave.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Has it been moved, Chair, or not?
No, not yet.
I'm happy to move the recommendations. Echo what colleagues have said about the events team, particularly with the illuminations, but the other events that we run, it's a lot of hard work. Only recently somebody's been in touch with me about goldfish as prizes. You know, these are things that do concern. It's like the fireworks and the drones, and as was said this afternoon, with the lanterns. So I'm really pleased that that's been added. So happy to move.
Councillor Finesse.
Happy to do second, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak in debate? No? Okay, it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour? Unanimous? Thank you, members. You can all go home now.